Well, welcome to week 1 video 3 for PSC 355. In this video, we're going to talk about the World Trade Organization and trade cooperation. Our central question in this video is, how does the WTO facilitate trade cooperation? Now, in general, there are three basic conditions that make it easier for countries to cooperate on trade. The first is what is known as the shadow of the future, what we might also call iterated interaction, the fact that two countries are going to repeatedly play a game over and over again. The second are reciprocity strategies. And then the third is that players, or countries in this case, must value future payoffs or future cooperation. Now, the World Trade Organization, as we're going to see, helps provide for these first two conditions. And we're going to talk about both of those in more detail here in this video. So let's start with this concept, the shadow of the future. So Robert Axelrod, a political scientist, wrote the book called The Evolution of Cooperation in 1984, where he made the argument that cooperation is more likely to emerge when players, in this case countries, believe they're going to meet again at some future point. As he argued in the book, what makes it possible for cooperation to emerge is the fact that the players might meet again. The future can therefore cast a shadow back upon the present and thereby affect the current strategic situation. An example I like to give is leaving a tip at a restaurant. Now, let's imagine for a moment that you are a traveler and you're gone to a foreign country, you're eating dinner at a restaurant, and you're never going to go back there. It's the only time you're going to eat at this restaurant, and you're purely self-interested and all you care about is your money. You don't care about anyone's feelings or living up to any social norms. Now, in that case, you're probably going to do something like this. Leave 0 in the tip line. You may not want to write what that person wrote there, but you're just going to look out for your wallet and say, I'm not going to waste money on tipping this person. On the other hand, let's pretend that now you're back at home in your favorite restaurant. You eat there every Thursday night. You love the ambiance. You love the food. In that case, if you would do the same thing, if you would leave a tip of $0, what's the likely outcome? Well, you're going to anger the waitstaff, right? The person who gave you your food and treated you so nice is probably going to be pretty angry. In fact, somebody back in the cooking room might spit in your food or do something to get even with you. The next time you come into that restaurant, how are you going to be treated? Probably not very nicely. You're probably not going to get great service. If you planned to return to a restaurant, you're probably not going to want to leave a bad tip. Why? Well, because you value your experience in the future. Leaving $0 in the tip line today is going to affect the future strategic situation. It's going to affect your future payoffs. The basic point here is that the choices that you make today, or in the case of trade, the choices that a state makes today, determines the outcome of the present move, and it also influences the future decisions of players. So, the World Trade Organization, the WTO, creates expectations of repeated interaction. Membership in the WTO has been very stable over time. In fact, it's only really increased. Very few countries have left. And so what that means is, hey, we're all members of this World Trade Organization where we're negotiating trade deals and we're trying to stick to this goal of reducing barriers to trade globally. WTO members are going to interact with each other regularly within that institution. So we know we're going to meet again. In other words, we know we're coming back to this restaurant again, or at least it's very likely. So if we think about our prisoner's dilemma game that we looked at in our previous video, yes, we know it's a prisoner's dilemma, and the dominant strategy of both sides here is to protect their economies, to not liberalize, because they're fearful that the other side will cheat on the agreement or back out of the agreement and protect instead of liberalizing as they promised. But if we think about this over the long run, maybe things could change if the two parties know they're going to continue to interact. In the short run, the difference for the United States and European Union for defecting and for the emerging markets for defecting versus both cooperating, the difference is one, right? You earn two utilities if you can both cooperate. You earn one utility if you both defect. That's not a substantial difference. But what if we play this game 10 times? Well, now the cumulative payoff for protecting and protecting is 10 utilities lower than the cumulative payoff for cooperating. In other words, the fact that you play the game over and over and over again means learning to cooperate becomes more and more valuable. So the shadow of the future or the possibility of iterated interaction can make cooperation easier. The other thing that can make it easier to achieve cooperation on trade is reciprocity strategies. There are many different reciprocity strategies. The most popular or most well known is what's called tit for tat. And what this strategy says is that a player or a state should cooperate on its first move and then play its opponent's previous strategy on the next move. In other words, hey, look, I'm going to liberalize today. We will open up our market to your goods today. But if you protect today, if you actually don't liberalize when you told us you were going to, then tomorrow I will protect my economy. I will impose those restrictions on your goods as well. In other words, it's retaliatory. It punishes defection. If you don't stick up to your agreement, you're going to be punished in the future. But it rewards cooperation. If you do liberalize today as you told us you would, then we're going to continue liberalizing tomorrow. We're going to maintain that open market for you tomorrow. Over time, this can allow for cooperation and trust to emerge. So to give you an example here, imagine that we have round one between the US and European Union on one hand and the emerging market countries or G20 countries on the other. And in round one, the European Union and US had promised to open up their markets to goods from the emerging market countries, but it turns out they didn't. They cheated, they defected. They protected their economies, while the emerging market countries liberalized theirs. In this case, we could say that in round one, the emerging market got a sucker's payoff. They got the worst outcome. They got 0 utilities, while the European Union and US got 3. So, in round two, the emerging market countries are going to retaliate. If they can use a reciprocity strategy, in this case, if they play this game again, they can close their markets off in the next round. This is tit for tat. Hey, you didn't follow through on your promise the first time around, so we're not going to allow you to have access to our market in the next round. Now, how does the WTO facilitate reciprocity strategies? Well, the WTO does a number of things that make this easier. First, it monitors members' behavior and collects and disseminates information about members' trade policies. This is important because you can't practice tit for tat if you don't know that the other country is defecting. How are you going to know more than 170 or 80 countries are in the World Trade Organization? How are you going to know that every one of them is following through on their commitment? It's difficult to monitor them. So the World Trade Organization monitors countries' behavior for you, for its members, and then tells them if they are cooperating or defecting. Hey, and if they say you're defecting, well, then you can retaliate. You can implement a retaliatory response. The WTO also sets standards of behavior. It sets standards for evaluation of trade policy. It defines what cooperation is and what defection is, what liberalizing or what protecting is. That's important as well to prevent misunderstandings. Together, these functions make it easier for governments to use reciprocity strategies to enforce trade agreements. The Dispute Settlement Mechanism, or DSM, at the World Trade Organization is central to this. It was formed in 1994 when the WTO was created, and it sets up a standard procedure for settling trade disputes. If a country comes to the WTO DSM and says, we think that this other country has defected, they are protecting their economy in a way that the World Trade Organization says they should not or cannot, Then the WTO will set up a panel and it's going to review the complaint. After reviewing the complaint, it will issue a report on its findings, and if the report finds that the country accused of violating WTO rules has in fact violated those rules, then the violating country can appeal, just like a court case. If that appeal fails, then the violating country is going to be forced or expected to alter its policies, or it will face retaliation. The WTO will actually tell the complaining country that if they do not change their policies, you can implement your own protectionist measures against that country. So, in an ideal world, the existence of the dispute settlement mechanism enforces WTO rules in a preemptive way. The knowledge that a country can retaliate against you through the WTO should prevent you from cheating or defecting on an agreement. But if prevention fails, then the dispute settlement mechanism can punish defectors and push them back towards cooperation.